Well, hello everybody, and it's lovely to see you here. Those who are from the church and from elsewhere, it's wonderful that you're able to come. My name's Robert McCorkadale. I'm the Vice Chair of the PCC here, and I'm a human rights lawyer. And so it's a particular delight for me to chair this first session because it's a series of conversations on how Christian faith has inspired people to work for the empowerment of others. But the person who's curated this, who's put it all together, is Jonathan Chaplin. So he's going to explain the series for us. Okay.
So yes, welcome everybody to this first in a six-part series on faith and empowerment. And the theme is that we wanted to gather local practitioners to talk about how their faith, their Christian faith, motivates them to engage in various kinds of empowerment activity across different fields of endeavor. So that's the uniting theme over the next 7 weeks. There are 6 talks, but 7 weeks, so there's no talk next Sunday evening. Make a note of that. And after that, there'll be 5 subsequent weeks. So these are not going to be heavy theological lectures. These are going to be story-based practitioner accounts of what it's like on the ground to do empowerment work. And so the themes coming up are peacemaking tonight, development, welfare policy, education. And the speaker there is sitting right at the front, Alistair Mack, interfaith dialogue and citizenship. And what better person, I couldn't think of a better person to kick off our series than my good friend and colleague, Ruby Quantson Davis, who is going to talk to us about peacemaking and who Rob is now going to introduce.
Thanks, Jonathan. Andy, should I use this mic or that mic? Okay. So just to tell you the format is that Ruby will speak for about 30 minutes and then there'll be about 20-25 minutes for questions and answers. Now this is an inclusive and safe space, so if any of you feel uncomfortable, please just talk to Jonathan and we'll work with you on that. And we finish at 7 p.m, followed by coffee and tea, and thanks to Viv of our inclusive church group for your help on that, and to Christina in her welcoming. Now, for those who don't know, our first speaker is Ruby Quantson Davis. She's the Learning and Impact Manager at Peace Direct. Now, Peace Direct is an international charity dedicated to stopping violence around the world by empowering local peace builders to resolve conflict and build lasting peace for their communities. She specializes in strengthening capacity around the world for conflict prevention and peace processes in places of political polarization, religious difference, and ethnic, racial, and gender divides. She's also an author and an associate member of Wesley House, Cambridge, and the bit which isn't in her CV is she has a mother who talks to her all the time to tell her she'll do brilliantly, and she has a husband who's come to support her. And we are delighted here at St. Paul's to welcome her back because she has been here and preached here before. So with that, I welcome you, Ruby.
Don't go too far, Rob. I will need you. I need your support. Thank you all. Thank you for this time. And I'm so pleased that you're doing this in the spring where the weather is better, because everyone knows I love the sun. So I'm happier than usual today. You know, one of Jonathan's correspondences to speakers reminded us that this is not going to be an academic and theological lecture. And I was pleased to see that. But also I became very conscious of what to present today and what to leave out. And I wondered why, you know, because I'm more of a practitioner than an academic. But I guess when you live in a theological college in Cambridge, married to a theologian who has no choice but to be here today, Richard Davis, and when you like to publish your work, and above all, when you grew up in a home where your dad would randomly ask you what you thought about the invasion of Iraq, your mind could be more academic than you realize. So I did take some time to be sure that I was wearing my practitioner gown. Today, I bring you my practitioner and embodied self. I acknowledge with humility and respect the people in far and near places who enabled me to have these experiences and practices that I will share today. The mentioned Peace Direct, and I've been with Peace Direct for about 4 years. So if I'm to deeply reflect on how faith has enabled me and motivated and guided my work, I think my reflections will span something like 25 years this evening across international politics, peace, and development, because many people and places have contributed to this experience, and I would like to honor them. I thank the warden, Dr. Jonathan Chaplin, the Reverend Imogen Ney, Mr. Andy Gordon, and the thinkers and planners behind this series, and above all, those of you gathered here who have relinquished your Sunday afternoon to me. Thank you so much. Today, I bring you 3 short reflections, excerpts from yet to publish pieces written over the last few years, checked every year, every couple of months, to see how I feel about them. The stories reflect on my work as a peacemaker or peace builder and how that interacts with the world around me. The connector is faith. The 3 stories will highlight struggles, and I will offer my faith responses, my, if you will, pick-me-up tips. I will share what empowers me to continue and how what I do empower others and vice versa. My first story or reflection I titled, "Show Me Your Faith." You may have heard it said that you can't give what you don't have. And this sounds better in my mother's language. So pardon me, it's not carrying the weight of what it says. But basically in her language, it kind of says that it kind of translates that when somebody without clothing says, "I will give you clothing," you better be suspicious of them. It's kind of like that, but you can't give what you don't have. It is a great lesson to hold. It helps us manage our expectations and promises. Sometimes, peace builders literally act as if they can give peace. Yes, we put in the measures, structures, and resources to enable us, to enable peace to prevail. But there are a lot more factors to ensure that we attain peace. We do not need huge evidence base here. Just tune into the news and see the many protracted conflicts across the world. In fact, several other conflicts do not even make the news headlines. If we are honest, those who work in peace building are sometimes more fractured than the people we are helping. It does not mean we cannot help them, but we also need to work on ourselves to mend brokenness and attend to wounds. This enables us to use approaches that are whole and healing. If we appear on the screen, you know our work now since COVID, there's been a lot of screen work, Zooms, and so on. Or even in person, if we appear to work with people in places of conflict, including homes, by the way. So I just want you to not think of just countries that are in wars, but conflicts occur in homes, in offices, in every human endeavor. If we appear there and we are broken inside, we can project and transfer those sentiments to others. Our much-needed solidarity movements can strengthen people, but it certainly can push people deeper into a stressful hole. Similarly, if we show up as people seeking wholeness and healing, I believe we can pass on that positive sentiment as well. This too can be transmitted, and it can transmit hope, and it can offer skills and wisdom and knowledge to keep peace work going. On the field, in places of conflict especially, I often reflect on the Apostle Peter's words in Acts 3, verse 6. Silver and gold have I none, but what I have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. It just reminds me when things get tough on the field, when I feel hopeless and helpless, that I do have something. We all do have something. But peace builders cannot always show up in strength and with hope. And whilst that is true, we carry a care of duty towards ourselves and to those with whom we partner, especially those in dire situations. If we are here to help, the least we can do is to do no further harm. We too need to do our internal peace work. Peace building then becomes a co-learning journey. It is a humble act to join others to find solutions, sustenance, and positive resilience. This is also power leveling, recognizing that we are all vulnerable, human, yet powerful in many ways. You would often hear charities talk about going to help someone or some places, the poor, the conflicted countries, to do this or that. And that is noble. But we cannot have what we do not have. So again, may I submit that we, global actors, are the ones that need help and support sometimes. Often, we do not live in those places. Our experiences are limited, and so we need to enter into a healthy relationship with those who have the corresponding experiences. We need a constant reflection on our own well-being, our state of mind, and our knowledge gaps. We cannot give what we do not have. Being in peace building in and of itself does not give peace. I lean on my faith to restore and replenish me. I take a break, knowing that as the text in 1 Corinthians 13:9 suggests, I know but in part. That text offers me such a grounding reality check, humility to step back and seek God's face. And so it was about 10 years ago when I was doing some work in Israel with a partner organization. We fell into a very difficult moment in the conversation with quite a diverse group. At some point, we could not get past the narratives held by each person or group. The threat of the process breaking loomed. I was frustrated. I went back to my hotel room and wondered whether to call Mama and cry or to withdraw from the process entirely. I remembered a biblical story about Daniel facing a particular direction to pray. My room faced the old city in Jerusalem. I knelt down by my bed and prayed. A prayer that perhaps I would sum up as, Lord, everyone in that room is your child. Come, Spirit of God, come and grant wisdom. Come and grant utterance. More things happened, but moving forward, the next session, I was energized. But as I went down the stairs to go to the meeting room, I noticed that I was wearing a chain necklace with many different crucifixes and, cross, my Anglican self. And I'm talking high Anglican in Ghana, like everything comes with all the works. So I kind of got a bit uncomfortable with this around my neck. I felt that there was too much tension in the room the previous day, and that I did not need to aggravate this or to kind of trigger anybody with any symbol of religion or anything else. I turned around, headed back to my room to take off the necklace. Halfway up the stairs, I stopped. And the question that came to me was, who and what do you believe? What is your faith? I decided to show up as me. The necklace I was wearing had these crosses from different parts of the world that picked up. So I used to work in Africa and Ethiopia. As some of you know, the African Union is based there, so we ran there for a lot of advocacy work. One of it came from my dad, and so it had a certain meaning for me. The other one, I had meaning on all of that hanging on there. So I took a risk to go, and I decided to show up as me. This was going to be a long-term process of political and community dialogues. I cannot hide. The people in the room needed to know me and all of who I am. And so I returned with my set of crosses. Let me put a little caution here. I'm not asking us to be unwise in conflict zones. We've got to pay attention to the security briefings. There are things we need to take off. There are times we cover our heads. There are times we take off our shoes. We've got to respect that. But the insight here, it's the internal dialogue that I'm voicing. Well, my strength renewed, I entered the meeting room with some form of wind beneath my wings. I greeted cheerfully, went on to issue instructions on how we were going to conduct the session for the day. There was no objection. There was cheers. Okay. My faith got even more activated. My skills empowered. That process went on for another 5 years. And I'm glad that I stood by what I believed, because it was not in the way. That was not the problem. As a matter of fact, because I stood for something, I was able to lead those sessions from a place of knowledge, strength, and as my mother would say, the rock of ages. So I returned to my hotel room thinking of a song in my Akan language in Ghana, and this is a song based on Jesus saying to the guy by the pool, described as the crippled guy, and the woman with the issue of blood. But generally, it was something around, your faith has made you well. Your faith has delivered you. And when it's said in my language, it sounds something like, Wujidi ajiwonkwa, your faith has reclaimed your life for you. And I tell you what, if I was in Ghana in the Methodist church, the Methodist women will start that song by now. So as soon as you mention a song, somebody at the back of the room starts that song. So it can get a bit chaotic, but now I miss that. I myself have been known to draw on songs of our foremothers and fathers to draw strength in meetings and crucial events. I think, my husband has been startled in one such moment. I think, Jonathan, you may have experienced one of that in Cambridge. We broke out into a Zulu song, which I have on the screen today. But this is a liberation song, Tula Sizwe. And for those of you who have worked in South Africa or been in South Africa or kind of know enough, this is one of the songs that said, hush, nation, your God will save you. Kind of like be still and know that I am God. And we'll listen to a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes songs bring the faith I need to move on. Reflection 2. I named this the cheerfulness bag. One of my struggles during the COVID-19 pandemic was that it was hard to be cheerful. This was not only because of the gloom, sadness, and uncertainties of the time. That was part of it. But there was just so much worry that it was abnormal to sound cheerful. This feeling has resurfaced in recent months for various reasons in international development and the last few years of highly publicized global wars. Here is a quick chat with a neighbor that demonstrated this abnormality during the pandemic. My neighbor said to me, neighbor says, "How are you?" Me, "I am wonderful." Neighbor looks at me suspiciously and says, "I have not heard anyone respond this cheerfully to 'how are you' in a while." Now, I was not sure if the neighbor found my response refreshing or offensive, but I was cheerful and joyful. I was not cheerful because the death rate from the pandemic was increasing day after day. No. The impact of the pandemic was devastating and was even worse for people in places of conflict. I could cry every day. I was cheerful first because my Christian teaching taught me to remain joyful in the Lord, Philippians 4:4. Mindful of all the hermeneutical processes that can be applied to this text, especially in today's dire consequence situation we are in, I'm choosing to understand that admonishment to mean be cheerful in spite of the challenges. Be cheerful because all is not lost. There is hope. There's got to be hope. Otherwise, I don't find a reason to wake up and go to bed, work. I don't find a reason to speak to another local peace builder. There's got to be hope somewhere. So I realized the need to be cheerful to be able to continue the work assigned to me on earth, to be cheerful for the sake of all those suffering around me, be cheerful for my neighbor and for our collective well-being. Does that mean I don't deal with my gloom and doom? But of course, I have a husband, so he needs to take care of that, right? No, but I think in that cheerfulness, and this text meant that I was building resources around me. And quite frankly, doing peace and conflict work, you build resources around you to kind of heal. But it's important to note that this state of cheerfulness is also very difficult to maintain, especially given the uncertainties I faced personally in my life at the time of the pandemic. Anchored in hymns from my upbringing, I decided to count my blessings. And you know that song. I named them. It was hard. Within this unending COVID period, news of bereavement filtered through. We were caught up in cyclones in the South Pacific. The notion of home and work changed. Friends were lost and found. Worry ran a shift with faith in a strange alternating manner, but there was also renewal. I soon realized one thing. The attitude of cheerfulness and joy lifted me up in order to lift others up. That is aligned with my calling. I had a strong sense that I was no good in my mission as a peacemaker unless I was able to be in a state of peace. I was, and still am, concerned about family in distant lands, uncertainties of the job market, financial instability. Hello, has anyone seen the federal budget of the US and the aid cuts in the UK? Plenty to worry about. but I was also acutely conscious of the threats to my peace and that of others with whom I interacted. The greatest threat to cheerfulness and the state of peace is that people do not believe you when you say, I am great and I'm wonderful. And I get it. So many people keep up appearances. These days, people talk about toxic positivity. I don't know what that is. But I don't think Christian faith has room for that. I think we can be real. We can pause, name what is wrong, reflect, restore when things get tough. I think our cheerfulness can be real. Because I think if cheerfulness becomes a sin, it will be very hard to work in war zones. And one thing that renews my ability to be cheerful is seeing someone in the middle of a conflict, still smiling, getting on with things. What is my excuse when I get 3 square meals? I had a call with a gentleman in the DRC. I was just sharing with Jenny how we've been very bogged down by DRC as well. And at the end of the call, he says, I have to go now. And I didn't realize that all this while he was behind a military barrier, half hiding, half getting connectivity, because closer to the military place, he would get connectivity on his phone. And I thought, he had to go through all of that to keep peace work going? But there have been times in my own work where I have found myself choosing to sound gloomy and worried because I felt that my cheerfulness made someone else feel inadequate. I wanted to show them that I know and share their pain. The result was devastating. And we've got to be careful about a problem shared is a problem halved, because I think it has to do with who you're saying it to and what their response is. I first wrote this of cheerfulness back a few years back. Recently, I have revisited this text. And I revisited it when there had been many losses in my own life. My sister Dinah died barely 3 weeks after my friend Dora had died. I lost women in the church who prayed with me. I came back to review my notes to see how I felt about it. And then there was the October 7th. Then there were issues in DRC. Then there were issues in Sudan. All of them were terrains we're working in. I checked my notes on cheerfulness. And I was grateful for parents who reminded us to be thankful and see the bigger picture, even as we mourned. We try not to let go of the joy. Because what I've learned is joy and cheerfulness are key ingredients in the recipes for peace. And I start with me. How do I feed who I am so that I can contribute what is needed in the world around me? And at Peace Direct, where I work now, we do not only spread the cheerfulness bag by the stories we bring from the field, the stories of renewal and change, but recently you will see on our website that we're sharing recipes from places of conflict to balance the stories a little bit. Some countries are always projected as doom and gloom, but life goes on. And Andy might show us one of such recipes that I bring you today from Syria. And you will see how those local peace builders build recipes in the middle of all of that. And we will just kind of go through it just slowly, and you can access it later. But just wanting to show you a little bit of how people are still building what they need to continue peace work. And all of that is not just cooking. It has meaning. It has fellowship. And I have learned a lot from those local peace builders. My last reflection. I titled this one, The Role of a Peace Worker. And this is going to be a little story within a story, so stay with me here. The key is to think of birds flying, moving around. Now, I don't belong to the Cambridge Bird Club or what do they call it? So they might interpret what I saw differently. But this is the Ruby interpretation, and you just have to work with it. Sitting in our living room, looking through the windows on a clear spring morning in Cambridge, I saw a bird hop onto a tree. It was grayish black. Within moments, another bird landed at the top of the chapel in our college. This one was whitish gray. My curiosity piqued, and I moved closer to the window with my coffee. My focus shifted to the second one because it moved in such a mysterious way. It appeared to be scanning the air for something. After a short while, the second bird, whitish gray, entered a small opening on top of the chapel. Out came a third bird. This one was gray. Now I'm calling them by their names. Whitish gray, which was the second bird, immediately flew off to a higher part of the building, and it kept observing the grounds from above. My development practitioner self kicked in. On the surface, the activity of the birds could appear quite messianic. Well, I was also writing this in Easter, so I think I was kind of like influenced by, Christ's death and resurrection. As I watched the birds, my peaceworker self took over and began to interpret the scene. Whitish gray, the second bird, was like a peace builder. We are on duty all the time. That bird went into the little hole to bring out another bird, out of that darkness into light. I was reminded of the text in Isaiah 61, one of my mission statements, with a healthy dose of humility. That text can sound a bit arrogant sometimes, but here it reads, 61 verse 1, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek. He hath sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to them that are bound." It was instructive to observe whitish gray fly off soon after leading the bird out of the dungeon. Whitish gray went up to a higher plane. There was no need to hang around. Still wearing my practitioner's hat, I reflected on how we give help to the needy. Much has been said about the need for development actors and philanthropists and funders and community workers to be embedded in the community, and that is great. But what is also important is there are time to step back, because those in those places actually do know their problems and they know how to solve them. And sometimes all we need is a little bit of empowerment. It pays to take a step back. The peace worker needs to operate from a place of clarity. It is from that level that we're able to discern needs and determine the appropriate intervention. We need to graciously detach in order to recharge. I value two principles in peace work. One is the need to respect the people and their space, and the other is the need to transfer skills and knowledge in a reciprocal way. In our effort to support work in places of conflict and in need, it is important that those people don't become dependent on us. The risk of recolonizing minds and practices is real. As a practitioner, I believe in self-empowering approaches. As a peace worker, the people and communities we engage ought to become peace workers. In fact, they already are. They do not need to depend on us for peace. But we figure out how we can empower each other. And so I observed whitish gray from the highest building, still looking at her friend down on the roof of the chapel. After some time, whitish gray returned to the spot next to her friend again. This time, her friend flew off to a higher part of the building as well. He was not just liberated, he had developed the ability to fly to a higher plane. He was empowered. He knew it was possible because he had watched Whitus Gray exemplify that. But above all, that skill was deeply ingrained in him. From this new spot, it appeared the second bird was also scanning to see who he can also support. You may be wondering about the first bird, grayish-black. He was firmly below, on the tree, all the while, looking at what was unfolding. I believe there are always people, energies, powers, preparing the ground and the way for us. We need such collaborators and enablers in peace work. As for Whitish Gray, she continued scanning, and guess what? She found another hidden bird, but that is another episode. These are the ingredients that ensure good resi peace. I invite you to peace building and peacemaking as a way of life. The other piece of my mission statement, which I want to end with, reminds me of this way of life. It is stanza 2 of Charles Wesley's A Charge to Keep I Have. And I think it's on the screen. To serve the present age, my calling to fulfill. Oh, may it all my powers engage to do my master's will. In this half hour, I hope that at least one message that comes through is that peace work enables us to contribute to the public issues around us. We also need some enablement to sustain us. I lean on faith, realizing that it does not all depend on me, but my little piece advances the solutions. I invite you to draw on what is empowering, be it song, poetry, a text in the Bible, a little retreat, to enable you engage the public issues around you. I will now pause for 3 minutes, where I will give you a little gift, because I like to go to places with gifts. That's African culture. And for you to reflect a little bit, looking at those gifts. And then I think Rob is going to come back, and then we do a little bit of Q&A. Thank you. Shows a little bit of what I've been describing, whether we're laying a brick or we're pulling people up. And so I leave that, and we can go on to questions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Ruby. That was incredibly kind of interesting, well, both interesting but incredibly powerful, what you were just saying. So, questions, please. I've got a microphone if people need it. Well, I have a question, which is, you talk a lot about your faith and how that helps a lot. You must, in your work, come across people who faith is absolutely something they don't want. You kind of hinted at it in your first example. How do you deal with that in your encounter, but also with other peace builders who similarly don't have any faith and aren't interested in it?
Thank you. I wanted to venture into that because that's my reality now, especially working in Europe more now. It's harder. Before we moved here, we were in the South Pacific Islanders. First of all, indigenous practices are very strong. And then where there is denominational religions, it's also very strong. I talked about, working in Israel. I was very comfortable working with people who had faith and would mention it. In Ghana, I've written this in a chapter in my book about you even greet someone on the street and their response has a God thing to it. Like, I might just say, oh, hey, how are you? And the response will have a prefix that says, by the grace of God, I'm well. So there are all these things that enabled you to practice your faith. It's harder here. How do I cope with it? I think there is a sense that we don't offend each other, even in our offices and whatever. But I also work in a place at Peace Direct where, whilst not offending, we're also enabling everybody to practice their faith. So I think, just like that example I gave, people just need to know me for what I am, and they respond to that. And I should also say that almost all the regions we work in, the regions that are sort of, I might call religious regions. And so what is problematic is the way that sometimes we want to do peace building and leave out the faith matter. But those folks, their peace interventions are anchored in faith, are anchored in traditions that are driven by faith and hope. And so, quite frankly, sometimes I feel that peace builders that are not acknowledging the place of faith or religion are doing them a disservice, because I've seen people come into meetings and they try to leave the faith matter at the door. Because faith, it doesn't fly in public policy talk at the UN. You know that. It doesn't fly at The Hague. I just changed my language there, which is kind of really hard for my stomach. So it feels more comfortable if you can appeal to it publicly, but I also think that we need to show up fully, because our strength lies in that.
It's enormously helpful. Now somebody else has a question. Yes.
Ruby, thank you very much for sharing the reflections. And your title is fascinating. At Peace Direct, Learning and Impact Manager. I'm wondering if there's anything, as you're now 4 years into the role, that you'd wish you'd known when you started that appointment. So over the last 4 years, is there any key learning for yourself which we can benefit from? Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, one of it is, incidentally, what I just mentioned. I assumed that people just knew the place of faith and religion in peace building. That wasn't the case, and I had to learn the hard way to weave it back in and remind us. Even as recent as last week, we had a conversation about it. And this is not an organizational position. It is just the sector we work in. One thing I've learned in the last 4 years, being at Peace Direct and more so interacting with the European part of things, be it EU or The Hague and so on, is how many, if you will, doubting Thomases there are around the efficiency of local peace building. There's still a lot of doubt that local peace builders can do their work and do it well. Now, for me, I grew up in it. I did it without thinking about the metrics. Here is the metrics. But I do also know that the metrics do not tell the whole story. There is more to the numbers. And so after 4 years, I have seen rather happily how people are opening up to new ways of measuring our impact, new ways of determining what is measurable, new ways of determining what is impactful to the peace builder and not just to a policymaker. And that has been quite revealing in the last 4 years and quite a journey.
Hi. Hi.
It strikes me that we just have very different languages, you and I, for very similar work. And how much do you feel that your upbringing and your identity enables you to have a language which I couldn't necessarily use? Because my background would be white colonial male enforcer. Even with religion, everything I represent just by that is everything which is imposed. And so for very similar things which you describe, I just don't think I could use those words. And so I wondered how much from your experience it is that which has enabled you, is that lived experience which you then bring forward.
I was going to ask what kinds of languages are you talking about, but you gave some examples there. Now, there is an assumption being made, and I sometimes sense that in different spaces, that perhaps just because you may be from the so-called global south, or that you're brown and black, that you are received, it's not true. Some of us, including me standing here, you face that dilemma of not being home long enough to belong there, and you're not white, you're not here either. When you show up on in certain countries, particular ones popping up in my head, but I won't name, you are the abnormal. So at the very base of it, we're going to have to work at it, and it's work. I could have filled this paper up, and gosh, I had about 10 stories to choose from. Could fill it up with kind of eggs on your face moments where it didn't work. And it wasn't because I grew up in that background. There are places where people would relate, but I have language constraints. I work in Afghanistan. I was in a conversation the other day, and I just wish I could speak their language. But also I just said to someone, I should have taken my Arabic classes seriously rather than mocking the lecturer in university. And so there's all of these things that you have to work, because the relationship building is important. Rob, we just had a joke at the beginning, because he said, the Quantson in your name, where is it from? I mean, he knows the Ghanaian names. I said to him, we are the traitors. I'm a Fanti. I come from the part of Ghana with the castles, the Elmina and Cape Coast castles, where the slave trade occurred. It sounds, when you're in the US, you are hailed, we want to see that place. In parts of Ghana, the story is that you're the ones who actually welcomed the colonizers and took their names, and that's not the full story, but sometimes when people want to tease you. So we bear that as well. And so, yes, I think at any given time, everybody can find a little advantage as an entry point into a place, but I think there's work to do. Because I can tell you the many times that, I think I don't know if I ever told you the story about one of my trips to Israel, where an official said to my host, do you need an African to come and teach you democracy? So, you get these things all the time. And later I thought, actually, yes, you do, because we've learned it the hard way through coups and all of that. So I think, yeah, language, we have to learn it and cultivate it. We don't have anything on a silver platter, really. Yeah.
Chris is being very polite and humble about what he does.
Yeah,
too.
hey, I know his work is powerful, and Chris has kind of entered places where many of us cannot be, and his stay there, that's amazing.
Okay, Imogen.
Thank you, Ruby, for everything you've said. It's been absolutely fascinating and full of wisdom. I wondered if you could help us think through how we respond well to the culture war environment that we all inhabit here. What are some of the tools or ways that we can bring better conversation into our culture wars, which by their very nature try and divide people?
Thank you, Imogen. It's a little presumptuous, again, for that. When you look at the maps, the map that shows the conflict zones, I think it kind of increasing in my area of the world, isn't it? So it's a bit difficult to be the one to propose one. I don't know what the dimensions of the culture war you're talking about, because we could be talking about different things, and boy, there's a lot. But I think fundamentally, we just seem to have lost that ability to dialogue and to deliberate over things and to hear each other and not to take a stance that says, I have no space to listen or to see you. And maybe coming back to some of what Chris was saying, these are times I draw on some of what I know, and I'm sure you have some in your language. But when I think of the South Africans, say, Sawubona, I see you. It drives my work, because I tell you, there are certain places, the way that people treat you when you get there, right from the border, I just want to shake the dust off my feet, as the scripture said, and go back home to better food. But you can't do that. We've got to train ourselves to sit. And I'm not talking about sitting with abuse, but I'm saying to sit and to dialogue and to deliberate on issues. And I say deliberate because that kind of practice for me does not create binaries. It's what are the various options we can look at. And honestly, I think we should do better even in the church. Because I don't know about your church, but my church back home, on an ordinary Sunday, full house, we could be about 600 people. Whenever I do any talk somewhere, I say 600 people, one service. There are services in my country, 3 services on a Sunday. Auditoriums that take 1,500 people on a Sunday. 4,500 people could come through those halls. So imagine if we are the ones who show better practices, and then we go out into our offices and our farms and our places of work and community life. Is this too idealistic? I don't think so, because I've seen it in communities. I've seen it with the Maori women I had the chance to learn from. Just passing it on and passing it on. And Imogen, I might just say, we also need to pay attention to what is pulling us away from this life that you describe. What are the things distracting us? What are the things causing unhealthy competition? What are the things setting us against each other? I think we need to put those practices, because there's no point, to your question. We've been very alert in introducing new practices that help us to have our partnerships in more equitable ways in the last 4 years. I've seen that at Peace Direct. And we're mindful of the things that may disrupt that. And they're not just ordinary human beings. They could be governments as well, as we are seeing now, stripping things down and undoing what has been done.
Time for one last question, if anyone wants to.
If there is no question, I thought that.
Okay.
I thought you were not done. I just felt like I moved on.
I just wanted to say thank you for the thing about cheerfulness. We're working with climate activists who are talking about joy as resistance. And I think that kind of picks that up, that actually that deliberate choice to be joyful and to be cheerful isn't a word I think I could use. I think I can use joy, but cheerful feels a bit wrong. But that deliberate choice to not be weighed down by things, I think, is a really, really important thing. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. You have just reminded me that cheerfulness doesn't even cover what I wanted to say. Again, if I borrow from my mother's language, it's a deeper thing you pull from here, because it starts with an imagery of you're going inside, means you go inside, and then you pull it out, it comes from here. It doesn't mean that we're always happy in our home, by the way, no, but it's a concept to draw on when things get tough in the field, at least for me, being away from home. Jonathan.
Thanks. Last week I was at a brief lunchtime meeting at Anglia Ruskin on the theme of how interfaith dialogue can unlock frozen conversations and make communication possible again. And the common thread coming through from many people in the university setting, but also elsewhere, is that increasingly people are locked in silence because of all kinds of multiple levels of fear and anxiety. They don't want to speak the truth as they see it because of these fears. Fears of recrimination, fears of exclusion, fears of discipline, frankly, institutional discipline. I mean, it may seem an obvious question, but what would you say in your experience and Peace Direct's experiences, what are the key ingredients of unlocking silence?
Thank you. It's hard. I want to refer back to the question you asked. Again, something to take away from the 4 years is that I think there was a time where, obviously, we needed the funding to do the work we needed to do. You don't want to offend people. You can see all of that happening. But we came to a point, and my boss says this better than me, when you just know that you're not going to change the system unless you name certain things. And that naming is going to make a whole lot of people uncomfortable. But if we didn't do that, then we're going around in circles. And I think there comes a point now, when I saw this, actually, one of the areas that I thought really I wanted to touch on is courage. That this work requires courage. It requires courage to name the unnameable. It requires courage to make people uncomfortable and sit with it. It requires courage to put in front of policymakers what they claim they cannot see. And it requires courage, my goodness, for your funding to be cut, which is happening all around the world now. So there is a price to pay for speaking up. But I think more importantly, what I see, Jonathan, happening is so many civil society, non-governmental organizations are coming together to cushion each other. We were just talking about weaving. They are weaving all these mats that cushion each other, because when you speak as an individual, you can be crushed. And there are a lot more dictators than we know. But when we do this as a collective, and interfaith is one of those spaces, but so many other ways in which we weave this fabric, I think it cushions people, because let's not belittle this matter. People do get burned for speaking up. But I think what I take from your question and take from this session is also that people are no happier being in that prison of silence. And so how do we cushion them? I think in my work, it's been the networks that support smaller organizations, that small organizations we work with in places of conflict, the financial support so they can continue to do what they need to do, so we're getting money to places under the radar of funders. But we've got to cushion people. I think we don't just tell people speak up. It's too dangerous and can be careless.
That's a powerful way of ending. Thank you. So I want to say one word of information, which is the next talk is on May the 18th. We jump a week, and that's on development by Philip Powell. But I have 3 thanks to make. The first thanks is to Jonathan, Andy, and the Inclusive Church Group for enabling this series to happen. The second thanks is to all of you. You've come out on a bank holiday Sunday, which is deeply impressive. And what have we heard? An astounding, interesting, enlivening, and one that gives me joy in listening to it. So thank you. And so above all, our great thanks to Ruby for all that she's offered tonight.